Congressman, great to have you with us today.
Well, good morning, gentlemen, and appreciate you having me back on the show. If I may say so, John, I listened to your segment there with my friend and colleague, Dr. Brown, and then I know you got Arter coming up there. So notwithstanding your present guest, I'm always impressed by your guest list, and you know, it's really, I think you're doing a service to the Commonwealth to having just good folks on, and I appreciate that.
You know, Congressman, oddly enough, we get the same comments whenever they see your name on the guest list, so you're in good company, sir.
Yeah, we're like, how did you guys get Scott RIGELL again?
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah, so
you ought to host the show sometime, you know?
Well, listen, that'd be a high honor. We'll talk about that.
Okay, we'd be honored to have you here as well, and you certainly would fit right in with the adults in the room. A lot to talk about today. I want to get, if I can, start off with your explanation. This National Association for Gun Rights organization running negative ads against you. Basically, they're claiming that you want gun owners in a federal registration system. They've been running these radio ads, not on our show, by the way. There's one organization that basically came out ahead of fact and said that they gave it a liar, pants on fire, and said they had absolutely no historical vote basis at all for their claims. What's the deal with this?
Well, John, it wasn't just radio ads. It was television, direct mail, robocalls, press conferences. Full court media. Initiative there by this group. And, I've been on the receiving end of some false claims by some of what I refer to as the hard, harsh left, kind of as expected. But this is the first time I've been on the receiving end of really false ads, completely false ads on the hard, harsh right. And I'm just, at 52 years old, I'm just realizing that, look, both sides have got groups that really aren't interested in the truth. I have put up the bill that I co-sponsored. It's a bipartisan bill targeted to and specifically limited to two groups, gun traffickers and straw purchasers, and it increases the penalty for those two crimes. And I make no apology for that. This is done at the request of senior law enforcement, federal prosecutors across the country, folks in my own district, Sheriff Stolley, Bob McCabe and Norfolk are saying this is needed to have one place in the federal code to hammer these folks, because I think when people use guns to commit crimes, what happens is it infringes on my rights as a lawful Second Amendment gun owner. And so this group came out of nowhere. I'd never heard of them before. I'm a lifetime member of the NRA. I actually own some of these weapons or firearms that some describe as assault weapons. I describe them as defense weapons. I don't concede the nomenclature there to the other side. And this group isn't interested in the truth, and that's all right. We've refuted it. We've put good information out, and as I always say, when Americans are given good information, they make good decisions, John. So we're in good shape.
Well, here's the bottom line as I understand it, and if you could put it in layman's terms, the way I understand it is basically what you proposed is stiffening the penalties for somebody that buys a gun for someone else, and the person they're buying it for can't buy it themselves. So, right, that's no different than...
Yeah, that's correct.
That's no different than... The point I want to make, that's no different than a 21-year-old buying liquor for somebody underage, a 21-year-old buying a carton of cigarettes for somebody underage. It's the same principle, isn't it?
Exactly, and this actually results in really heinous crimes. It's happened in our own region in Hampton Roads. An uncle bought, actually the 16-year-old picked out the gun and that was used to kill his teacher and wound an assistant principal at a local private school. This was when I first moved up to Hampton Roads. That story broke. It was horrible. It happened in Chesapeake. In New York, of course, this was exactly what happened with those first responders, where the fellow who shot those first responders, he was not eligible to buy a gun. He got somebody else to buy the gun for him. And right now, it is essentially This is an accurate and true statement. It is essentially a paperwork violation, and federal prosecutors have said we need a definitive, declarative piece of legislation that we can go to, uniquely go to, and put pressure on these folks. And my view of it is that the Second Amendment is this high and impenetrable wall. It should be, where on the one hand you've got folks who shouldn't have guns, and they need to be, we're supposed to not let them have access to guns. And on the other side of this wall are the rest of us, lawful gun owners. And this bill in no way infringes on our Second Amendment rights. In fact, I think it strengthens it. So it's just really sad, though, that this group, I reached out to them. I tried to meet with them to say, look, you must not understand, because they're saying that I'm leading the president's gun agenda. They've got my face morphing into the president's. They said that this is a national registration program, and that's false. And they are not interested in the truth. And you know what's unfortunate about this is that Senator Rand Paul is actually raising money for this group. And I've reached out to his office to say, look, Senator, this isn't right. Your name is being used directly. He's got an email at this organization. And at least to date, when I've reached out to him, there's been no acceptable response. We just got a response from his chief of staff last night that said, look, this is between you and this group. And frankly, that's not acceptable. And I'm just disappointed there. But
it's outrageous behavior from this organization because they don't have the facts right. I mean, it's completely false. And, it's one of the problems right now where this rhetoric, either the far left or the far right, is just over the top and it's drowning out truth. Now, I want to get to your bill that you just co-sponsored the other day to restore military tuition assistance for our veterans through cuts to Egyptian foreign aid. Explain that.
Well, John, in full candor and transparency to you and your listeners here, I don't think this bill is going to become law, and I knew that, but it's a statement. It makes a statement of my values, where I think we ought to go. And the allocation of dollars is prioritization. What do we prioritize over something else? And as I look, this is not a knee-jerk reaction here, but I've long held the view that our support for Egypt needs to be dialed back significantly, if not completely, but at least enough to let that essentially the new regime know that where they're headed, their direct and irrefutable composition, which includes the Muslim Brotherhood.
Right.
This deeply troubles me, and for us to be cutting back on benefits to veterans while simultaneously funding at major levels foreign aid to Egypt is not where I think our priorities ought to be, and this bill simply takes it from one bucket and puts it in the other. And it's a good bill to co-sponsor, and I appreciate Mike Fitzpatrick putting that bill forward.
Congressman, yesterday we spoke to Dr. Pamela Falk from CBS News about the president's trip to Israel. One of the things we noted was there is a standing treaty that for whatever amount we give in aid to Israel, we must match it to Egypt. It was part of a treaty, I believe, negotiated during the Carter administration during those talks. How would your bill affect that? And can Congress amend that treaty or ask for the president to renegotiate that so that we're not hamstrung by those terms, which apparently, with the Muslim Brotherhood, are simply out of date?
Well, this is I think why it's a good idea that we elevated the bill, that I signed on to the bill, because it expresses at least the sense among some of us in Congress, and hopefully an increasing group within Congress, to put pressure on the administration to renegotiate that treaty. It was part of that mechanism by which the agreement was reached those many years ago, but it is really out of date. And it will be a real challenge to unlink the two, that is, unlink the support that we need to provide Israel, which I fully support, for anyone who's been there or studied the issue. I've been there, of course, and it's just a tiny little piece of a territory there, and they need our support. It's in America's best interest for us to be there to support them in the way that we are. But we've got to unlink it from the support to Israel,
right.
To Egypt, and that's not going to be easy.
One follow-up question for you, sir, and it comes from one of our Facebook followers, Henry Eyre, a listener in Central Virginia, I believe, who asked us to ask you, what would it take to get term limits in place? The latest numbers that Henry Eyre saw was that over 70% of Americans are in favor of it. And, of course, the group No Limits had said on the show that that's one of their top 10 recommendations for revamping the way the government operates.
We need more representatives to lead by example. This has been very important with me, a principle that I learned back at Parris Island in 1978. The drill instructors didn't ask anything of us that they didn't first do themselves. I have self-imposed term limits of 12 years. I think that's a good number. It kind of matches up 6 terms in the House with 2 terms in the Senate. And, we have to elect members who really are willing to do what's best for our country rather than what's best for a political career. And I'll vote for it. I have voted for it. I'll continue to be an advocate for it. And he needs to press his representative, whoever serves and represents him and his family, to press their representative to move this forward. It's got to come from the people and kind of bubble up. Members do listen to their constituents, and that's the way it's got to happen.
Congressman, today you're going to have an opportunity to weigh in on Representative of Wisconsin Paul Ryan's budget. Basically, all Democrats are expected to vote no. The Republican caucus needs no more than about 13 or 14 Republicans who can vote no on it. Already 3 have come out and said they're voting no, one being Dr. Brown, who we had on earlier. Where do you stand on this?
Well, I wish my good friend and colleague Dr. Brown would do as I'm going to do, which is to vote for the Republican Study Committee amendment, which I did yesterday, and also vote for the House Republican budget. It can be referred to as the Ryan budget, but I serve on the Budget Committee. I helped in some way, along with my colleagues, craft the budget. And is it the perfect solution? Does it represent exactly what I'd like to do in every single category? Of course not. But it is, and I do respectfully take issue with this idea that it's really no different or just marginally different than our Democratic colleagues. We reform entitlements, they don't. Our budget balances, theirs doesn't. The one presented by the Senate, as you know, incorporated $1 trillion more in taxes and still doesn't balance. So, the Republican Study Committee amendment, which I, again, voted for, and less than half of our Republican conference did yesterday, it is, I think, a sharper reduction, irrefutably, on spending, and that's where I stand. So I really don't want us to peel off and not advance this budget. I sure hope we're able to get the majority needed to advance it.
Dr. Brown, though, says that there's really not a dime's worth of difference between the Democratic budget and what I'm going to call the Ryan budget, but what you're saying is when you go into the detail, there are really significant differences, right?
Oh, there are, and I'd be happy to maybe in another show we can kind of walk through what those differences are, but they're profound. And look, I helped defend 21 amendments by my Democratic colleagues in a kind of we went up to almost midnight the other day marking up the bill, and there are profound differences. And we can get into them here if you'd like, but just the very fact that we actually balance the budget and they don't, this is not an insignificant point here. So we really are boldly addressing this, and the differences are significant, and I'm really proud of what we've done here. And I did vote for the RC, and I mentioned this, John. I mentioned this because it is an expression of my commitment to fiscal discipline, tightening up spending. Dr. Brown is correct in saying that look, we need to do more to control federal spending. We agree on that and many other things.
Congressman, we are up against the clock, against news time. I want to ask you one very quick question. Last night, the Senate approved and sent to the House a 6-month spending bill to keep the government operating through September 30th. It is a 600-page bill. How do you get through that before you vote on it today?
Yes, well, you can't literally, but most of it we have worked through, read through, because it was a version. It's just been modified. What I'll be looking for today is the changes, the delta, the changes in what we sent over. That's the way we'll get through that.
There we go. Congressman Scott RIGELL from the 2nd District here in Virginia. We can't thank you enough for the time, as always, and we look forward to you saying yes when we ask you to guest host the show in a couple of weeks.
Okay, I'm waiting. Thanks so much.
All right, Congressman Scott RIGELL here on The John Frederick Show.